Circular saws. All right, this is the most common saw. If you're going to start out, the tools you need to get are a drill and driver and a circular saw. You can build a lot with just those 3 tools. I recommend getting a good battery set. If you want corded, that's fine. I won't go a whole lot into detail. If you want more really good details, you can go to the tool time video. I'm getting sawdust all over. So you have your blade, right? Obviously, this is your blade guard. Your blade guard is to protect your fingers. And then this is your upper guard. This is also to protect your fingers. This one doesn't move. Your underguard does, because obviously it has to move out of the way of the wood. It's spring loaded. So as you push into the wood surface, it pushes this back. And then as you pop out the other side, it's going to close. So the only time really the blade is exposed is when you're coming out the other side until you're all the way through for this blade to come back. But when you're using this, you just never put your fingers underneath the board. Pretty well safe. Also, just watch out what's underneath the board. You don't want to cut through the material underneath. So it's important to adjust the depth. And so you want to make sure you undo the power cord or take out your battery when you do this. And there's always a lever. And that enables you to move your base plate up and down. And so as you can see, if I can hold this all at the same time, if you lower all the way, the blade doesn't stick out at all. And so you can fine tune and adjust it to the depth of your material, right? And then you just pull the lever back and lock it in place. And now as you cut, you won't be cutting through that much. You want it to stick out about 1/8 at max from your surface, 1/8 inch to 1/4 inch, because you don't want to cut through your sawhorse, and then it's also just safe for practice. Again, remember the tool time videos, the less the blade sticks out, if somehow you had an accident, you trip, fall, something happens, you hit your leg, it's better to cut through 1/4 inch of your leg or your hand versus 2 inches or something, right? So it's just, if an accident happens, you want the least amount of cut or damage as possible, and also protect what is underneath. So this saw has, each saw has different ways to adjust the depth and different things. The battery ones are pretty standard this way. Some of the old corded ones, there was a knob on the top, as you see in the picture. And so the base is what the saw rests on. It's important to keep this flat against your surface. And you can see there's 2 grooves right here. This one is in line with the blade. If you can see that in the video. Let me make it bigger. Oops. Make this bigger. See this plate? See how there's 2 notches. This one is for 45, but this one says 0 on it. And so what happens is this is the same in line with your blade. This edge right here is in line with your blade. All these things are in line. So as you're cutting, those are your reference points. You can look at the blade to see where you're cutting. You can look at this notch right here and see where you're cutting. Or you can look at the 0 if you're in line. If these 2 things are in line on your marking on your board, you're cutting in a straight line. So those are the basics of a circular saw. When you go to change the blade, you're going to make sure you take the battery out. That's the most important. And so you don't want to accidentally cut yourself, especially with corded tools, because there's no safety. On a battery tool, there's a safety trigger, so you have to pull 2 triggers at the same time. So it's less likely for an accident. But a corded tool, when you squeeze that trigger, it's live no matter what. And also, it takes a while on corded tools for it to stop rotating. There's a break on battery tools where basically as soon as you let go of the trigger, it stops rotating. The circular saw, you just have to wait for momentum to stop. And so it can keep cutting for a long time after you release the trigger. So in a lot of ways, battery tools are even safer than these corded tools. There's all kinds of different blade choices. Some are made for fine finish, some are made for framing. Ones we got in class, I just got a big pack of them, but they're called Demo Demons, but they're awesome. Diablo Blades makes them, but they can cut through nails and everything and keep going. They have that carbide tip tooth just to make them extra tough. A kerf, remember, saw kerf. We talked about this with hand saws, but also with power tools, power saw blades. Usually a blade is a 1/16 to an 1/8 inch wide. And so when you're cutting your board, that 1/8 inch makes a big difference. You might not think, what does it matter? Well, when you're measuring stuff, you want it to be perfect and not your measurements to be tight, especially in trim work. That 1/8 inch is a huge gap. When you're doing and you go to paint it, you're really going to notice that. So you have to get perfectly right. And so you're going to make sure you always are cutting to the waist side of the line. So this is the board you want to keep. You measured from this side over, you're keeping this. So you want to cut to this side. If I were to measure from this side, I would reverse that. I would have cut to this side of the line. You never cut directly in the middle. You're cutting to the side of your line, the waist side of the line. I didn't grab a jigsaw. It's all right. We don't need to hold one up for you guys to know what to do. There's two different kinds. We do have a barrel grip and we have a top handle or D handle. And so they have adjustable plates on the bottom. You can change them to an angle. For the most part, you're keeping them flat. And the important thing is keep that base flat to your surface as you're cutting, and you want to move really slow. All right, these are designed to make intricate, detailed cuts. They have a really small blade, and they can make curved cuts. You want to move really slow when you do, because that blade is thin, and it likes to wander instead of staying straight up and down, perfect 90. Because you're putting pressure against it, it's going to try to follow the grain and just the pressure, and it's going to start leaning, and you're not going to get a square cut. And so as you're moving, you keep it full throttle. This is really hard for students to understand. When I say cut slow, they let go of the trigger a little bit and they make the blade move slower. You don't want to do that. You want the blade to be moving full throttle, and you want to move forward really slow. So what happens is the kids go really slow in the blade and then they push harder because it's not cutting. So you go full throttle and you control the speed at how you're cutting the wood. So full throttle, and then you cut into the wood very slowly. And that'll help give you those cuts. And if you need to, you can make a relief cut, which means as you're cutting, you go forward and you can't quite make the turn, so you back up a little bit and then you do it, and that's going to create a wider spot in the waist area to give the blade more move to turn. So those are called relief cuts. If you have to do it, you can do that. Reciprocating saw. Most people are going to call this a sawzall because Milwaukee was the first one to really make it, and that's what they called their tool, was a sawzall, and so that's what people are going to know. Same way with the circular saw. A lot of people call those skill saws because Skill, the brand, is kind of the first one to really make it a popular power tool. And so a lot of people call it skill saw, circular saw, sawzall, or reciprocating saw. And how a reciprocating saw works is the blade just moves forward and back. It just keeps going like that. You can watch Tool Time video for more information on these things. These ones are pretty safe. They don't instantly cut off your finger. You might cut yourself, but you'll feel the pain before, so you can let go of the trigger. Different variable speeds, different things like that. Anyways, these are used a lot of time for demo work. They aren't very detailed, and so they're great for demo. If you make a mistake, this is your friend if you make a mistake. The blades are designed to be, they're fairly cheap. They're designed to cut through anything. So make sure you get the right blade for the job. There's special metal ones for like thick metal. There's ones for nail embedded wood, or there's blades that are made just for like clean wood. Say you're pruning trees or something at your property, you want one, there's not going to be any nails in that, so you want a really aggressive tooth blade. The finer the tooth on the blades, the harder the surface. So the really small teeth are made for metal, the really big teeth are made for really clean wood. So difference. You control the speed with the trigger, a variable speed trigger. Most tools nowadays, it's not an on and off switch. You have a trigger and you control the speed at which the motor runs. So I'm going to show you guys our bandsaw. This is the Milwaukee M18 bandsaw, probably the best on the market right now. And so this is designed, you're going to be cutting through metal with this. This is a plumber's tool lots of times, or electrician to cut metal conduit. But so how it works is the blade spins in a circle. It's a one giant blade. If I flip it over to the back side, it's heavy, so it's hard to hold. But so this blade is a continuous loop, right? And so it's under tension. And so what happens, it goes around these wheels and it just keeps spinning, right? And then so here's the guard. And so the blade is spinning down towards the guard. You want to rest your material against the guard as you cut through, and just try to keep it your best at a 90 degrees. And this is a big open mouth, so this can cut through, I believe, a 5-inch piece of pipe. But so just know a bandsaw works with that continuous blade that is spinning in one direction. It's not a circular saw where it's like a solid piece of blade that spins. This is a loop, right, that is spinning a band, is why it's called a bandsaw. And so these are awesome to cut through pipes or just different metal, angle iron and different things. Metal workers will use this too. And so that is a bandsaw. And so remember, as you're cutting, the blade's going to automatically force it towards the base. And so you want to try to push that up against your cutting material, and then use two hands, and you're going to squeeze the trigger and go for it. It's a basic bandsaw. Miter saw, how the test calls it. Remember, in hand tools, we talked about a miter box. And so what they say, this is a combination between a circular saw, right, a circular spinning blade, and a miter box. And miter saw. And so there's some like this one in this picture, they don't slide, they just go up and down. I would call this a chop saw because it just chops up and down. but this one is on sliders. This is what we have in class. So the saw actually slides forward and back, and this just gives you a lot more cutting capacity. This can only cut maybe a 6-inch board, where this can go up to like a 12-inch board. And so just giving you a lot more cutting capacity, that ability to slide. When you're using these, you don't want to just cut. You want to make sure you get it up to full speed before you move it into the material. And then also, if you have a sliding one, you want to bring it forward, come at an angle to the front of the board, and then slide it back through. And so different kinds. There makes some that don't bevel. So this has a miter, so you can adjust the angle this way. Then you can also lean the saw. So the saw normally cuts 90. If it's a compound miter saw, you can also bevel it, meaning lean it back and forth like this. And so for crown molding and stuff, you need to make those kind of cuts. For the most part, you just move the miter angle around. And so a miter just means an angle cut, essentially. Something to remember, some tools, they're coming with a lock on them, meaning you squeeze the trigger and you push this little button in, and that locks the tool on. Basically, you can let go of the trigger. It's kind of like cruise control in your car. You don't really want to use that. That's a dangerous thing because say you drop the tool or something, it's going to keep running. You're cutting into your leg, it's not going to stop. The only way to stop it is like cruise control, how you hit the brake, or you squeeze the trigger again, and that releases that button. But in general, you do not want to use that, the tool lock. There's reasons they have those there. Sometimes you need it because whatever. You'll see that in situations when you come to it. But in general, remember, don't use the tool lock. And that is everything you should need